Good afternoon, I'm your streaming host, Sentinel. Today we branch out a little from Speaker's Corner and head to UC Berkeley for the campus premiere of What is a Woman, a documentary made into controversy since its initial release on June 1, 2022. Berkeley, known in part for the Berkeley free speech movement, references a student body group in the 60s who challenged campus regulations limiting their free speech rights. At the time, many students were recruited by outside organizers for public protest. After hundreds of students were arrested using free speech rights, the media went on to project Berkeley was a sanctuary for radical leftists. To avoid the negative image, Berkeley decreed students could no longer participate in political activism near campus. As support grew for the movement, the administration grew weak and was unable to enforce its policies. Several campus organizations, students, and faculty began to assert that free speech was a moral obligation. On December 2, 1964, about 5,000 students marched to the administration building to listen to Mario Savio give a speech. Shortly after, 1,500 students entered the administration building and held a nonviolent sit-in, resulting in violence by local police attempting to remove protesters. Eventually, the Board of Regents was unable to support the right to control activities on campus and hired a new chancellor, whose first act was to meet the demands of the free speech movement. In 2017, videos of a group labeled as Progressive Left surfaced burning signs that read free speech, with onlookers saying things like, "Clear fucking political message right there," and "Fuck free speech, bitches."
Clear political fucking message right here. Look at that. That's just beautiful, isn't it? Fucking beautiful.
Hate speech isn't free speech! Fuck hate speech!
Yeah, fuck free speech, bitches. Fuck your free speech and shit.
Sit on it! Sit on it! Somebody poop on it! Piss on it! Sit on it!
Yeah, sit on it.
Rub your face on it!
Ladies and gentlemen, we now go to Mello on the beat at UC Berkeley.
Omnigender, novigender, and maverick.
Oh my god.
Now, some of these sound like department store colognes. Some of them sound like Transformers, but they're all nonsense. What about sexual orientation? Here there are just a quaint 17 choices. And I'm just telling you what one of the choices is. This is a sexual orientation on this government form. I'm telling you what the government form says. This is a sexual orientation on this government form. And the sexual orientation is faggot. That is
Wow.
don't shoot the messenger. That is actually what it says on the form.
Wow.
As a sexual orientation. Now, what does all this mean? Well, it's more evidence of what I've been saying for years now, which is that gender ideology is insane. It's also poisonous and destructive. And that's why I oppose it. I oppose it fundamentally because it is not true. And I oppose all things that are not true, especially those things which eat away at the most basic and essential realities of life. But rather than stand here and pontificate, I'd like to do what I've done at all these events during the college tour and kick things off by responding ahead of time to what I think are the four primary objections that people always raise if they are criticizing my film or any of the arguments I make on this topic. I'm not going to make a straw man of the opposition. I'm going to rather endeavor to acknowledge and respond to the points they actually make. So we'll do that. Objection one. They say, you talk about sex and gender like they're the same thing, but they're not. Sex is biological, but gender is a person's understanding or feeling about themselves? No, I don't think sex and gender are the same. That's my answer. It's you, the gender ideologue, who has essentially collapsed the very sex versus gender distinction that you engineered. Now, there was a time perhaps when you would have agreed that there is at least a biological difference between a woman who is female and a self-identified woman who is male. But now you yourself have erased that difference. You insist that trans women are women. You insist that they're exactly the same in every way. You even changed the definition of female in at least one major dictionary to include men with the gender identity of female. So you treat both the term woman and the term female as interchangeable. They are both now gender identities according to you. If you did still affirm a definitional distinction between sex and gender, then you would have to also affirm that there is in this world a binary category of male and female, and that those who belong to each group cannot cross between the two. But you will not affirm any binary at all, or any substantive distinction at all, between so-called trans women and women, which means that the whole gender versus sex thing was nothing but a sleight of hand trick this entire time. Now, as for me, I have no use for the term gender, unless we're talking about the gender of words, which is where the term gender originates in the English language. I see only men and women, males and females. Each individual in either group has a different way of being, a different way of expressing themselves, of understanding the world. But we don't need the word gender to describe that because we already have a word for it. It's called personality. Now, we live in a culture today where a person might have 5 genders and 7 sexual orientations, but no personality to speak of. That's because the whole category of personality has drowned, has disappeared inside the sort of LGBT alphabet soup. Objection 2, they say, you say that women can get pregnant. You know, you say that that's one of the definitions of womanhood is that a person who can get pregnant. But what about women who can't get pregnant? I mean, doesn't the existence of infertile women clearly disprove your definition of the word? Now, answer, I do not say that every woman in the world can get pregnant. Obviously, that is not true. I say that women are of the nature to get pregnant. It is natural for a woman to get pregnant. It's something that only a woman can do and no one else. In a similar way, I might describe a human being by saying, among other things, that he's a creature who walks on 2 legs. Does that statement become invalid just because there are some people who can't walk? Maybe someone has an accident, or there are infants who can't walk. Does the existence of amputees and infants call into question the notion that humans have 2 legs? If you were asked to describe the human species to some alien from outer space, would you say, in part, in describing humans, would you say, well, humans have 2 legs to start with? Or would you say, humans can really have any number of legs? No, you wouldn't, because such a statement would bring to mind horrifying images of humans who look like centipedes. You can be more specific in your description because it is true that humans have 2 legs unless accident or disease or deformity intervenes. The humans without 2 legs should have 2 legs, and that's the point. This is known as the exception that proves the rule. And that's why if you only have 1 leg, and you go to a doctor, you want to figure out what that's all about, the doctor's not going to say, well, some humans have 1 leg. Legs are on a spectrum after all, you're fine. No, the absence of the additional leg is a 100% confirmation that something has gone wrong. Again, it's the exception that proves the rule. The same with the sexes and their reproductive abilities. Age, disease, genetic defect, or other circumstance can preclude some females and some males from partaking in reproduction, but that doesn't at all even slightly call into question our understanding of the sexes or of their definitions. Every female is of the nature to get pregnant. She is supposed to be able to get pregnant, unless she's too old or else she suffers from some sort of ailment. Which means that a woman who is 28 years old and not able to get pregnant will go to the doctor, and the doctor will know that something is wrong physically. And he'll usually be able to tell you what it is, because females are supposed to be able to get pregnant. It's a definitional aspect of being a female, being a woman. Now, if a man goes to the doctor and says, "Doc, I can't get pregnant," the doctor will know that there's something not wrong with his body, but wrong with his mind. At least doctors used to know that. Objection 3, they say trans people have existed throughout history and all over the world. You know, the binary is a Western construct. This is a common rebuttal. It's also the dumbest damn thing I've ever heard. You might as well say that photosynthesis or like gravity are Western constructs. No, on the contrary, the rejection of the binary is a modern Western construct. Gender ideology was itself invented. We know who invented it. It was invented by old white guys in the middle of the 20th century. We know who those guys were. They wrote books. They made arguments. Several of them were pedophiles. John Money, Alfred Kinsey, you heard about some of them in the film. We can trace their ideas back to their roots. We don't have to go very deep because they don't go back very far. The idea that men are male and women are female, and that the two categories are immutable and cannot be changed, I mean, that goes all the way back to the dawn of human civilization. There has never been a culture before ours that believed men could have babies. Such madness is uniquely modern. You know, it took the most educated and technologically advanced civilization in history to come up with an idea so batshit crazy. Now, what I'm saying doesn't really comport with the claims that you often hear. You've probably heard about many cultures throughout history and around the globe who have more expansive ideas about gender, they say. Well, the people telling you this are lying. Take it from me. I've actually traveled outside of the Western world, and I've talked to people outside of the Western bubble about this issue, and I've listened to what they've told me. I guarantee very few people on the left have done the same. And here's where the confusion arises, I think. There are other cultures where, in some circumstances, a man may play the role of a woman. You know, there are places where, for one reason or another, often it's a sexual or religious sort of routine, a man may dress as a woman or play the part of a woman. But none of these cultures believe that the man actually is a woman. See, that's the difference. They're not confused about that. Outside of the West and Western influence, you're not going to hear of pregnant men anywhere. And you certainly would not have heard about them in history. You'll hear a claim, for example, by the left that, because they like to retcon history and sort of change it after the fact. So you hear a claim that Native American cultures have something called two-spirit, which is allegedly the indigenous version of transgenderism. But that label was invented by gay activists in 1990. And even then, it obviously describes something spiritual and religious. It doesn't describe a physical male who is supposed to be understood as an actual, literal woman. If you ever get a hold of a time machine, you can go back 150 years and go out to the Great Plains and ask the Comanches whether men can get pregnant, and you're not going to like the way he delivers that answer, probably. But it's going to be no. Also, keep something else in mind, that if trans people have existed in such large numbers throughout history, and yet were not affirmed or able to live their truth openly, because that's what the left says. They say that, no, it's not that trans, we see that it looks like the numbers of trans people have increased 20-fold over the last 5, 10, 15 years, but the left says, no, that's you're misinterpreting the data. There have always been this many trans people. This is not a social contagion. It's just that in the past, they weren't able to live their truth. Well, if that's the case, and they also tell us that if you don't affirm a trans person, that you're going to cause suicide, then shouldn't we find throughout history just this unbroken, cataclysmic epidemic of people killing themselves for mysterious reasons because they were not being affirmed as trans? Should we see millions of children throughout history, every single year across the globe, killing themselves because they weren't being affirmed as trans? That's not what we find. In fact, childhood suicide basically didn't exist until modern times. All but didn't exist anyway. That has become a phenomenon and an epidemic alongside gender ideology. Gender ideology is not solving that problem, it is causing it. Objection 4 is, why do you care so much? Can't you just leave people alone? Let people be? Well, the first answer is that's not a rebuttal to my arguments. That's more of an intellectual surrender, if anything. Also, why are you asking me why I care? I mean, you're the one who insists that we should care deeply about trans and LGBT issues. You literally throw parades announcing your sexuality and gender identity to the world. I mean, you have flags, for God's sake. You can't throw a parade and have a flag and then ask me why I care about it. You put it on a flag. You're not going to shut up about it. Why do I care? Well, you want me to care, right? You demand that I care. You won't allow me to not care. It's just that you want me to care in the way that you determine and arrive at the conclusions that you have pre-approved. You don't have a problem with the fact that I care. You have a problem with the conclusions that I have drawn, which is a very different sort of thing. And you're too cowardly and shallow to debate the conclusions, so instead you pretend that you just want to mind your own business, even though you were 10 seconds ago dancing in the street in leather bondage gear, screaming about your lifestyle choices into a megaphone at a bunch of confused children. So don't give me that why you care nonsense. But since you asked, I will answer. And the answer is very simple, actually, because I'm a simple person. I care because the truth matters. You know, truth matters more than anything in the world. Truth matters more than ideology. It matters more than your preferences. It matters more than your feelings. It matters more than your self-identification. It matters more than your self-perception. It matters more than your life and more than mine. So when they say that, when you say all this, you're putting people's lives at risk. You're a physical danger to people. Well, if speaking the truth puts your life at risk, then I would still speak it. That's a risk worth taking. And if it puts my life at risk, I'll still speak it, because it's a risk worth taking. Here's the point as far as I see it, and this is not platitude. Life has no meaning. Nothing has meaning apart from truth. There is nothing to fight for except the truth. There's nothing to live for except the truth. There is no love without truth. There's no beauty without truth. There's no joy without truth. There's no freedom without truth. There is nothing without truth. And that's why I won't give it up. For your sake, for anyone's sake, or for mine. That's it. Thank you.
Bravo.
We will now be entering into the next section of the night, the Q&A. And you will be lining up here in this row if you would like to ask a question. Okay. We will be asking questions. You will give your name. You can ask one brief question. Keep it brief, keep it respectful, and yeah.
Hi, Matt. My name is Ryan.
Hi.
I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for coming here and speaking to us. And, the documentary was awesome. I just want to, what would be, like, outside of the title of your documentary, which is a great question, but outside of that, what question would you recommend that we ask people who believe that gender and sex can be separated from each other? What question would you recommend we ask such people to get them to actually reconsider this insane perspective?
Well, really, any question at all on the subject is a good starting point. Because what I found, and you saw this in the film, is that they can't answer any question at all. On that particular topic, I think the most, I'm a simple person, so I start with the simplest questions. And so I would start by asking them, what are those two things? Like, what is sex? What is gender? So you got to start there. And what you're going to find, and you saw this in the film, if you saw it, that the vast majority of people you ask this question to, now they'll confidently declare that the two are separate and they're distinct, but then you ask them to define what are they, and it all kind of starts to break down. And I think they start to realize that they don't even have their own ideas very straight. So I would start with that. What is the difference? And then if you have to ask a follow-up question, if they give you some kind of answer, then I would ask, what is the difference between gender and personality?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So this is following on from your conversation with Joe Rogan. If the legal benefits of marriage should only be given to couples that can, in principle, bear children, why would we still extend those benefits to fertile straight couples who choose to not bear the children? Why would we reward them even though they're not doing the thing that we're trying to incentivize?
Yeah, and you're correct that was a question that came up quite a bit with Joe Rogan. I think we went around in circles about it a little bit. My answer is that, first of all, it is my view that if you are a married couple and you're able to conceive children, obviously not all are, but if you are, then you should. I do actually believe that you have a moral responsibility to procreate and bear children. Why would a couple that can, in principle, procreate but isn't, why would they still get the protections of marriage? Well, because it's not a challenge to the definition of marriage. Because the definition hinges on not whether they procreate, but whether the potential is there. So they have the potential to procreate, which means that they are married. It's just that they're married, and in my view, refusing to participate in one of the essential functions of marriage. And so I would encourage them to participate in it. But it doesn't change the definition, because the potential is still there.
But is it still worth incentivizing with like tax benefits and stuff if they're not going to actually have children? And they're choosing not to?
I would incentivize it because I want to incentivize them to have kids. In fact, I would incentivize it even more in that case. I think we should have a lot of laws incentivizing people who right now don't want to have kids for all kinds of various reasons. Maybe they feel like they can't afford it, maybe whatever the case is. I would like to see even more laws incentivizing them to do so. Okay. Thank you.
Hello. So I was wondering, I've been following this is all new to me, and so what I was wondering is, like, the gender ideology and the woke ideology are basically like religions. So couldn't we use the power and the separation of church and state to like expunge it from the schools and government institutions?
I 100% agree with you. It does function like a religion. And that's the only way to really understand gender ideology. It's the only way to understand the claims, to the extent that it can be understood at all. The only way to understand, the only framework that can even begin to make sense of it is as a religion. It's really a spiritual claim that's being made. I mean, when you hear that I'm a woman trapped in a man's body or whatever, that is, it doesn't make any sense, but it's certainly not a scientific, evidence-based claim. It is a religious kind of claim. So I would agree with you that, yeah, the same principle that says that you can't, a teacher can't preach the gospel to her kids in a public school environment should also preclude a teacher from preaching the gospel of gender ideology. And yeah, I think that's an argument we should start making more. Thank you.
Hello. So my question was about, like you said that you should try to be like empathetic towards people struggling with determining, or like if they think they're a man trapped inside a woman's body or something like that, you should like still be empathetic towards like the struggle that they're going through, right? Like you would agree with that?
Sure.
Yeah. So my question is like, if you believe in God and like why do you think God made transgender people? If it's such a hard struggle for those people to deal with, like why did God make people that have that issue in their life?
Because I think we're a fallen race, and so you can ask the same question. Why did God make people who struggle with any number of other confusions and proclivities and sins, which we all have our sins that we struggle with. So this is, if we're to get into a spiritual conversation, I would say this is a product of sin entering the world. But I don't think that God makes anyone to be transgender. That's the whole idea of transgender is something that we've invented. We've invented this category of someone. What does transgender mean? It means you're beyond gender. That's a category that we've invented. What you have are people who are confused, and I don't think that God is the author of that confusion. It's more so that our flight from God and from the truth has resulted in all manner of confusion, including this one.
So So you don't think anyone's born with like any innate sense or any innate like confusion, or it's all picked up like throughout their lives? Like you don't think anyone is naturally born with transgender issues, basically?
I don't know. I mean, are you born a kleptomaniac, for example? I suppose if you talk to a neurologist, they might say that some people have a predisposition to that. I think that so it's possible that something has gone wrong in the brain from birth that might contribute to it, but I think that's a very small number. I mean, look, just go back 90 years. How many people were struggling to understand their own gender then? It was, it may have existed. It was a very, very, very tiny number and quite anomalous. But I still would say that, sort of theologically, that's a product of the fall and of sin entering the world.
Well, yeah, thank you for letting me talk tonight. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out here and speaking to us, and thanks for taking my question. My name is Ben. I understand that you're a Catholic, and I'm happy to see that we're actually talking about God here freely. I wanted to ask you a question with that in mind, and that is, the Bible, as the Word of God, clearly defines both the definition and roles of men and women. To what degree, if any, do you personally believe that the Bible should play in speaking to people that are confused or ignorant about biology as regards to gender, even if they don't believe that the Bible is true?
If they don't believe that the Bible is true and they're struggling with this really fundamental confusion about their own identity, then I would lead with the Bible. Because I think if you lead with the Bible, you say, well, the Bible says this, then you're giving them the excuse, you're giving them the out that they're probably looking for, sort of desperately, to ignore everything that you're saying. And they can say, well, I don't believe the Bible, so what does the Bible have to say to me? And then they can just move on and discard your point, and that'll sort of be the end. I think a much better approach is to speak to them about just basic logical truths that anyone can understand whether you've read the Bible or not. And then once you've connected to somebody on that level, then I think you've begun to build a foundation where they're going to be more open and receptive to talking about faith.
Thank you very much.
Hello, sir. I would like to thank you for being here and speaking tonight. I have a question for you. My name is Ashley. So you stated that the idea that there is nothing as such a man and such a woman, that those aren't really a thing, that's a modern Western notion. With that being in mind, I'm from Eastern Europe, I'm from the Czech Republic, and I came to the United States. I'm now an American. My question is, I myself, as an immigrant outside of the Western world, outside of the Western civilization, and now you an American, do you think that there we have a responsibility, people like I, to kind of protect common sense? And if we have that unique responsibility, in what ways maybe do we have a unique responsibility? And if so, do we also have a unique ability to do just that? I don't know, sorry, I was kind of cracked there. Thank you so much.
Do you have a responsibility to us, or do we have a responsibility to you?
In any way you would like to take the question.
Yes, you have a responsibility to me. I'll do that. No. We both have a responsibility, and that's an interesting point. That's one thing I'll say. If you watch the film and the scene where we're in Africa, talking to people outside of that Western bubble, it usually gets a laugh when people watch it. It's kind of funny, and I couldn't help but laugh at certain parts of it. But it's also quite sad and embarrassing for me as an American. And the fact is that, when I left there, those people, they just felt sorry for me. They felt sorry for me. In fact, I think it's in the film where I asked them, would you ever want to come and live in America? And they say, absolutely. They laughed at the idea that they want to live in America. So I think that shows that we as Americans are not fulfilling our responsibility to be a light of just truth and the shining city on the hill we heard about from Ronald Reagan. I do think we actually have that responsibility. We have not fulfilled it. Now, you as someone who maybe didn't grow up with a lot of this stuff coming into it, then I think your responsibility is the same as mine, which is to stand for that basic truth and to not allow yourself to be conformed to this Western mania, which it sounds like so far you haven't. So, well done.
I hope not. Thank you so much.
on the topic of people born this way, but what biological and chemical changes are occurring in society through pharmaceuticals and food like genetically modified food contributing to how people see gender and what we currently see in society and what your film is about?
I think it is.
Your world.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it is contributing to a certain extent. I couldn't speak with any authority on how that works exactly. I mean, I just saw, and this is not directly related to gender, but I just saw a headline yesterday about how sperm count has gone down exponentially over the last several decades. Now, I'm not saying that in and of itself explains why we have the proliferation of transgenderism, but it just goes to show it's clearly there's something in the food, there's something in our diet and our environment that's affecting us at a really basic internal level, and that's something I think is worth exploring.
Yeah, for sure. I encourage people to look into that aspect of it as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, team. Why in your movies and your discussions do you selectively ignore and misrepresent the recent burgeoning medical and behavioral literature that demonstrates that gender-affirming care and similar medical interventions demonstrate consistent improvements to mental health, suicidality, and general well-being?
Which study are those?
There are probably like 30 studies by this point, all produced in the last like 10 years or so. Anybody can look them up on...
Okay, let's just, here's the problem. Here's the problem. I'm not impressed by just you saying a study.
No,
okay?
30 studies.
Fine, well, there could be 100 studies. There could be 1,000
studies. You can read
studies.
them.
Great, yeah, and I have read them. Have you?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So I'll give you one example. I don't know if you can give me any examples, but I'll give you one example of a recent study. And this was just in the headlines. It said that it proved that double mastectomies for minor girls improves their well-being. And this was a study, and it was proven, peer-reviewed. Then you read how they actually conducted this study, and you find out that they interviewed a very small selection of girls in one region of the country, all from the same socioeconomic background, and they did their follow-up, I think it was 3 months later, and based on a follow-up a few months later, they've determined that, it improves well-being. You see the problem here? Now,
Yes, there are many, but this is the exception to the rule. Many of these studies use observational data with various follow-up from like 6 months to 5 years to 10 years, and they don't demonstrate what you claim.
Well, you can say the word study, but what I'm saying
you
is...
You can look them up.
Okay.
They're like, you can Google them.
Yeah, and so can you. It sounds like you have.
Yeah, I've done it a good bit.
Oh, you've done it a good bit. Okay, all right. Well, I just
PubMed,
gave you...
transgender health, PubMed, NIH, gender-affirming care, and I mean, it's just frustrating
let me ask you,
anybody can look at this.
What's your name?
Jacob.
Jacob. Let me ask you this. How do you think they would have large-scale, long-term studies about the effects of these drugs and these surgeries on children when we only started doing it to children at a large scale a few years ago? So how could that even exist?
Yeah, I think scale is probably one of the more prevalent challenges of these studies.
Okay, so we're already hearing that there are challenges in these studies.
Yeah, every study has challenges. Like any scientific truth, like all of the scientific truth that we take for granted today, they're built on methodologies that fundamentally have flaws. Like if you want to make a specific critique, you can do that. If you're talking about if you're talking about sample size, there are very well demonstrated statistical results that you don't need 10,000 people to get like a statistically significant effect.
Yes, you do.
No, you don't.
Here's
No, absolutely not. It's like a very basic statistical fact. A sample size greater than 1,000, that can that has very nice asymptotic properties.
Jacob, here's what I know. If you want to even begin to claim that a study has proven that castrating and sterilizing little boys helps them in the long run, then you would need to have a large sample size of children who've gone through these procedures, and we've checked back with them in adulthood to see how they're doing. Those studies do not exist. They can't exist because we weren't doing this to kids at anywhere near this scale even 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago. What that tells us, Jacob, is that the kids we have right now, they are the sample.
Actually, that's not also
they
the case.
are the experiment.
Specific study.
Are you able to just use your common sense as well? I mean, you can rely on studies, and you can just shout the word "study" at me, and then start.
No, I'm not even.
Let me finish.
Sorry.
You can shout about studies and list random medical organizations. That doesn't impress me. There was a time when every medical organization would have told you that bloodletting is the way to cure every disease.
Sure.
There was a time when every medical organization told you that the vaccine stopped transmission. So,
yeah.
But are we able to just use common sense as well? And based on common sense, determine that it is certainly not a good idea to sterilize and castrate children and remove body parts from children before they are possibly old enough to consent to those procedures. Don't we know that just based on basic moral decency and common sense?
Sure, but you're trying to make causal statements about the impacts of medical interventions. You need to demonstrate that with science, and I'm not mentioning, and I'm not like making an ethos argument of like, look at this organization. I'm saying that there are like very rigorous ways to substantiate your claims, and the people that are spending lots of time are doing that, and they come to conclusions that are very different from the ones that you say. I'm not making an appeal to ethos. Anybody can look up these studies and just see how they're done.
Right, and these are also studies being done by the people who it just so happens are profiting from the procedures that they say work.
Do you think the professors are getting paid by like some? Yes. You think there's somebody like paying your professors for? I think you should talk to your professors because that's very unrealistic.
You think they're not being paid?
No,
I'm doing this for free. I'll tell you that.
No. They're definitely being paid. But like, if there's some shady organization paying them, like, I'm sorry, it's sort of silly. Like, talk with your professors. That's like sort of silly.
Okay.
How can you know anything? There's always some conspiracy.
I think you can know things without asking for permission sometimes from professors to say that you know them.
No, I'm just saying.
And one of those things that you can know is that it's never okay to castrate a child. All right. Good conversation.
Hello. So I just saw people shouting and like a bunch of barricades, so I thought it was fun to come here. I didn't really know who you were. So before it started, I googled you on Wikipedia. I scrolled down to the controversy section, and it said, you said anime was satanic. So I was wondering if I bought your book, would you watch a season of any anime with me? I'll get you a jacket.
With you? Huh? Well, I have to watch the anime with you, you're saying?
Yeah, or just like live.
How's that gonna work? Zoom. Okay, I hate Zoom meetings, and I hate anime. Now you want me to combine the two? What is?
I buy your book.
You have to buy about 100 books to make that worth it.
So if we started a GoFundMe to buy 100 books, you would live stream you watching a season of anime?
Yes.
Hello, Matt. Check that video, cut that part out. Yeah, you just admitted in front of a bunch of people to watch anime. Hello, Matt. My name is Colin. I'm in my third semester at a community college, and I was going to ask you, basically, do you think that academia is redeemable in any way? And I ask you that because I know it's Ben Shapiro's position that students should essentially just go along to get along and agree with their professors to get good grades. But looking at that as a game plan, I don't feel like that's a good way to win back academia. So I'm wondering, at your thoughts, what could I do as a student?
Yeah, I don't know if that's an exactly accurate representation of Ben's view. I think I agree with his basic take on this from what I've heard, which is that you're not called to go out of your way to, seek out problems for yourself and and you have a goal here at the university to get an education such as you can get at this one, and then it's okay, and then go on to get a job, and so it's okay to make that, to pursue that goal and to not sort of jump on every hand grenade that you find. But at the same time, if you feel called to take a stand, even at the expense potentially of your academic career, then I think that that's extremely noble, a noble thing to do. I think a good compromise here is just, you don't have to go looking for the confrontation, but you don't run away from it either. And what you absolutely cannot do is deny reality or deny your values explicitly under any circumstance. And if you're put in a position where it's either deny, where you suffer a consequence or you deny your fundamental beliefs, then, well, it's time to suffer the consequence. As far as reclaiming academia, I think that that's, it does take people like you, but a lot more people. And this is a generational struggle. What I'm always saying is that we lost these institutions over the course of generations. It's going to take generations to get them back. So you right now, your generation is at you're sort of the first wave. You have to look at it. There are going to be many waves after this if we ever want to, reclaim the beach, sort of.
Thank you for doing God's work, and God bless SBG for life.
Evening. I don't mean to offend, but he actually took my question, so I guess I gotta get a 2-in-1 here. I'm a recent high school graduate and also an even more recent fan. So after graduating high school, I've been visiting a lot of my friends, and it's been great having a lot of political conversations and seeing them sort of come over more to the right a little bit. But it seems that with every single person I know, we're all social oligarchy.
So you're asking, I'm just trying to understand the exact question. So are you asking what, interpersonal relationships when it comes to pronouns, or?
Kind of, yeah. Just because it's something that I'm personally noting. Sorry, this is extremely anecdotal, but it's also a backup question. Sorry.
Yeah, I think, first of all, it is much deeper than a political, to your last point, it's much deeper than a political division at this point, certainly. I think that the division we have in our culture is deeper and more significant and wider and more unbridgeable than the division that existed even at the time of the Civil War. Which doesn't mean I think that there will be a Civil War, because a lot of other situations are different in this country, but I think that it's just that you got two sides of the aisle, as it were, that have no fundamental shared belief systems or frameworks at all. And how do you bridge that? When it comes to pronouns, I don't even know if this is exactly your question, but I will say, because I get this question a lot about how do you deal with people in your life who are making demands about certain pronouns they want you to use that are not based in reality. And I think it's sort of the same thing that I said to the other question, is that you're not, especially with someone you care about, in a relationship you care about, you're not going out of your way to antagonize them, but at the same time, you can't cooperate with the delusion. So, and yes, that might alienate a relationship in the short run, but you also have to have some faith that in the long term, they're going to see that you were their real friend, and all these people that were cooperating with the delusion and sending them deeper into this, into their own despair, they were not the real friends you were. So I don't know if that answers any part of your question, but I thought I'd say it anyway.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, guys.
Okay, good.
This will be the last question of the night.
Hello, Matt. My name is Katarina, and first, it's an honor. Now, despite being raised in a politically moderate and Christian household, I became indoctrinated by the far left when I was 15, and I remained a part of it until I was about 20. And my entire perspective was changed due to Ben, Michael, and most significantly you. Now, as a woman of 24, I am looking forward to my future when I have my own children, and I'm afraid. I want to know, as a parent, how I can prevent my future children from falling into the same trap that I did.
I start with lots of prayer, is my first answer. Second answer is, if you can avoid it, you keep your kids the hell away from the public school system, if you can avoid it. teachers, although there are plenty of bad teachers out there, there's also plenty of good ones. But it's not, it's the entire system is stacked against you and your values. And your kid is going to spend, 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, 9 months a year for the first 12 or 13 years of their formative years in this environment that's utterly hostile to everything you've taught them. So if you can save them from that, then that's going to go a long way. And then the other thing too is, and this is kind of advice that nobody should need to give, but it does need to be said apparently, is that if you give your child, especially your young child, 9, 10, 11 years old, a phone with the internet access, then you've given them access to an entire, this is an entire universe on their phone that they're now living in, that you're not in. They're creating their own life entirely apart from you, that you don't even have access to, really. Which means that your ability to influence them is going to be severely diminished. And so for a lot of these kids, they've got the phones, they're on the phones all day, they go to public school, the parents just don't have a chance. They can't get a word in edgewise. And so you have to make the home into a, I know that this is a term that, has taken on all kinds of unfortunate meanings, but you have to actually make your home into a safe place for your child. And if you could do that, then I think your children have a really good chance.
Thank you.
One more.
All right, let's do one more.
Hi, I'm Felicia, and
Well, this better not be a hard question, because I like you.
Well, maybe. I'm a psychology professor at a community college, a local community college, and the question, or mainly advice I want from you is, how do I navigate through an educational system that's obviously left-leaning, and how can I not get fired by speaking the truth?
Well, I specifically said this couldn't be a hard question. I mean, it is a hard question because the thing is, to begin with, it's always going to be easy for me to say because I have a job where it's my job to go out saying all these things. I don't have to worry about getting fired for it. And so I'm not, in many ways, I can't relate to the position that you're in. It's going to sound selfish to say, but I'm sort of glad you're in that position because we need people like you in these fields, especially the mental health field. So we need you. So sort of selfishly, I'm glad that you are there, even though it's difficult. So what I would say is, I guess the only thing I can say is similar to what I said to someone a few questions ago, that I don't think you have to run into the room, shouting, being confrontational and shouting and causing a scene all the time. I think that would be a bad idea. It's a good way to get fired.
That person you spoke to was my student, by the way.
Oh, there you go, okay. But what you can do, especially in your class, is make it a place where sanity and truth is welcome, and maybe in a sort of quiet way. You don't have to you don't have to put it on a billboard with flashing blinking lights or anything. Hey, I disagree with it. But you make that your classroom into that, and I think you can have enormous influence on lots of kids, and they, in ways that you might, I'm sure you know this, in ways that you might not even see or understand, but down the line, reflecting on it, they're going to be glad that you were there.
Thank you.
All right. All right, what do you want? Let's do one more. They're going to kick us out of this room here in a second.
Okay, hello. Thank you for coming, Matt. So my question is, tribal societies like the one shown in the film, in general, tribal societies are less likely to have as many rules as our modern society. For example, tribal societies in general are more likely to be promiscuous, And so that's why people say they have more liberal views on gender, kind of like the two-spirit example you just mentioned earlier. So my question is, in the African tribe in the film, were they a very rule-based society, or would they have more rules than, say, compared to like our society?
Yeah, it's interesting. I suppose the answer is yes, although I don't know if I would say rules. I think actually, well, no, let me change that. I think the answer is no. I think in our society we have a whole lot more rules. There's just rules everywhere you look in our society. The difference is that in their society, it's not rule-based, it is duty-based, it's responsibility-based. And they define themselves in many ways by their duties and responsibilities and how they participate with the larger social structure in ways that we don't. But they also didn't really look at it as rules. You know, they looked at it as, well, this is what you do, this is how you live. You know, I was talking to our translator, Paul, and he was kind of taking me through the tour, and he said, well, if you're a father, you know, you provide for your family. It's what you do. You didn't look at it as a rule. It's just, that is what you are here to do. And of course you would do that. And they also said, if you do that, then you'll be happy. This is how you find happiness, is by fulfilling your duties and your responsibilities. So I would say less rule-based, more responsibility-based.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay.